If you are new here, this is the most beginner-friendly complete web development course, and these are some of the projects we will be covering in this course. I upload lots of lessons per week, so please subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss any of them. I respond promptly to comments, so if you want to ask or say something, feel free to drop it in the comments. If you missed any of the previous lessons, the link to the entire playlist is down in the description box. Let's get started. Hello and welcome once again. So in this section, we are going to look at JavaScript. JavaScript is the language of the web. It is mainly used for modifying or controlling the behavior of websites, but it can be extended for other purposes as well. So using a library like Node.js, you can use it for back-end databases and stuff. It can even be used for desktop and mobile apps. There are ways and means of doing that. We will get into that later. JavaScript is very easy to learn, but there are a lot of terminologies that we have to get used to. And know that these terminologies and these concepts that you'll be learning here, take it from me, wherever you go, they apply. So whichever programming language you move to, say you decide to move to a whole different aspect of programming altogether, you decide to go to mobile app development or whatever, it's these same concepts that will apply there. All right, we are going to take JavaScript in two different parts actually. The first part is where we'll be learning the general programming concepts, and then the second part is where we'll be focusing on web apps or websites. In that part, we'll be using JavaScript to control or modify the behavior of our HTML documents, our website. All right. So first, we'll look at the general programming or universal programming concepts. If you take it serious over here, wherever or whichever programming language you move to, you are not going to have an issue at all. Alright, so let's go ahead and create our file system, okay, and create our folder for this section. I'm going to delete these two folders over here because I don't need them anymore. Alright, and then I want to open my busy code folder. You can use the terminal or the git bash, just like the way I showed you in the previous lesson. Alright, so I want to create a new folder here. I want to name it intro to JS. JS is short for JavaScript, right? And JavaScript files also come with the extension .js. Open the folder and we'll open the folder in VS Code, and then we'll add a few files. Go to your code editor and then open the folder. Alright, so once you have your folder opened, you can go ahead and create these files. So you want to create index.html like that, and you want to create style.css, even though we won't be using it much in this section. And then finally, we want to create main.js for JavaScript. Okay, that will be our JavaScript files where we add our JavaScript code. In your index.html, let's add a simple boilerplate code and put in a few content over here. Let me change the title to intro to JS. All right, let's add a few content over here. Let's add an h1. The h1 should say introduction to JavaScript. Then let's add a paragraph that says JavaScript is the programming of the web. Okay, finally, we want to add another paragraph. Not finally, but let's add another paragraph that says we will be learning JS in this section. And finally, let's add a button over here that says hello there. Okay, let's give this some identifiers. I want to give this an ID of topic. I want to give this an ID of details. This is just ID, so you can give them whatever you feel comfortable with, but just so that we have uniformity, you can also name them just like I'm naming them. And then finally, I want to give this an ID of welcome button. All right, so let's save it. Okay, remember that we learned that you have to connect your CSS over here. And if I didn't mention this before, you can have as many CSS files as you want. Just make sure that you link them over here. And for different HTML files, like we did in our previous project, you have the index page, you have the about page, you have the services page and all that. So for each of those pages, you can create different CSS. Just make sure that you link the right CSS file in your head tag. All right, so over here, we want to use the link, and then of course, you want to give it the relationship. You want to see style sheet. Then you want to give the href. Want to see style.css. You want to give it the type. Okay, and it's text stroke css, like that. Let's launch our live server. All right, so let's continue. Now that we have our basic boilerplate code set up and we've put in some content, we've successfully linked our CSS file over here. Right, now the next thing to look at is how to link JS file. Just like CSS, we can also link our JavaScript file. And remember that whatever files you are going to create throughout the project must be linked to your root file or your root document, which in this case is our index.html. Not must, but if you want this JavaScript file that you are going to create, you want it to modify this HTML document. So it must be connected to this HTML document. But if it's only working or only modifying some other HTML document other than the root file, then you can put it over there. All right, so we will see these uses as we go along. Just like the link tag, we can link our JavaScript in the head tag. There are two main places of linking it. You can link it in the head tag or in the body tag. How you link it is by using a script tag like this, and then you want to say source, and then the source is just like the href for the linking the CSS, right? So here we want to go to the location of the file, and it's in the same location. So you see index dot we named it main.js, right? As simple as that. Then we can close our script tag. We've mentioned somewhere before that when I say scripts, okay, I'm talking about the JavaScript file. We say scripting, okay, and there are a lot of other scripting languages. So JavaScript is a scripting language. All right, so let's see if our script tag has been successfully linked. Okay, so why isn't our content showing over here? Okay, so our content is. So I want to just add some JavaScript code. Don't worry about this for now. I'll show you what I'm doing. So this will alert. So I'll see it is working. Okay, so did you see this? This is what I just did in the JavaScript code. So our JavaScript has successfully been linked. Right, so that is one way of linking our JavaScript file, but this is not a recommended way of doing it. The recommended way of doing it is to put it in the body tag, and we want to put it at the end just before the closing body tag over here, and you see that it still works. Okay, the reason being that wherever you put it, it behaves as if that is where it is located. So if you put it over here, it will run before the rest of the code runs. Okay, so it's over here, so this line will run before these lines run, which means that if there's a lot of code in your JavaScript file, it is going to delay the rendering of your HTML document. So your home page or your page might take too long to load. So you want to keep it at the end so that your whole page will load first, and then you can now load your JavaScript as well. All right, that's the best way of doing it. But you can also do just like we did for CSS. You can also have an internal JavaScript. I can add JavaScript right here using the script tags, okay, like that, just like we did for the CSS. So script opening and closing tag, and then inside there I can write any valid JavaScript code, and then I'll see, and you see that it still works. But once again, it is not recommended. It's better to keep your JavaScript and your HTML separate. Your CSS, you want everything to be neat and clean. the best place to put it is here. And you can have multiple JavaScript files. You just link them down here. You just link the other one down here as well, so you can see other .js or whatever. So as many files, JavaScript files as you have, you link them all here, right? And you can have external JavaScript files too. We'll look at some of them soon. Alright, moving on. So we've successfully linked our JavaScript file. Now I want to show you some of the things that JavaScript can do. We've already mentioned that there's a whole lot of possibilities, okay, when it comes to JavaScript. Right, so I want to first delete this line because we don't need it, and I want to save. Right, then you go back into our JavaScript file. So we've already seen this line over here, window.alert. What this does is that it gives you a pop-up whenever the page is refreshed or whenever someone lands on the page. So if you refresh it, the pop-up will give this message in the apostrophes over here. So as you can see over here, we don't use it very commonly, but just so that you know it's there. And this is how you write comments in JavaScript. Start with 2 forward slashes, and then everything here is a comment. All right, like this. You can add another line. This can say another comment like that. Okay, let me show you some of the workflows of JavaScript. We are going to try to change the content or a few things in our HTML file over here using JavaScript. So just like we do in CSS, the first thing of course is to grab the particular element that you want to change, right? And I want to change this heading 1. I want to change the color using JavaScript. So how I do that is by first going through the document. Okay, by document I mean the HTML document. Okay, dot use get element by ID. All right, like that. And this means that I want to get the element using its ID. So you have to provide the ID over here. And the ID that we used was topic for the heading 1 element, right? Where is it? Yes, this ID topic. Okay. Now I want to say dot style, meaning I want to change the style, and then dot color. Okay. And I want to say equal to red. Let's save it. There you go. So we've changed the color of the HTML document using JavaScript. And when you do it like this, we see that you are doing it dynamically. So you are changing the content of your HTML file dynamically. And that is what we use JavaScript to do. We use it to change HTML dynamically. Well, this is not really dynamic. We'll come to see what we really mean by dynamic. What we really mean by dynamic is that the style that we changed here could have been changing depending on some factors, right? So it could be blue, it could be red, it could be green, depending on some value, maybe the user inputs. Okay, so we look at that. The next thing I want to show you is I want to try and then style one of these elements as well. I'm going to change this paragraph over here, okay, using JavaScript. So I want to see documents, of course, dot get element by ID. I want to add the ID over here. What ID did we use? Okay, details. The ID says details, and you want to dot style once again, and then want to sorry, I said I'm going to change the content, so use the inner HTML. Don't worry about this for now, okay? I just want to show you how JavaScript works. Okay, so I say dot inner HTML, and then I can change it to whatever I want. Okay, so I can say I have changed the content. All right, if I save it, okay, so you see it is now changed to what I put in the JavaScript. All right, so I want to comment out this line. It keeps popping up. I don't want it. All right, next I want to show you a cool feature. When we press this button over here, I want something to happen. Okay, these are some of the things you would actually be using JavaScript for. I want to press this button and I want to see something happen on the page. So what I'm going to do now is that when I press this button, I want this paragraph over here to disappear. Okay, so let's actually rename that button to remove second p or paragraph. Okay, so when I press this button, I want the paragraph to be removed, and I can do that using JavaScript. Okay, so first I want to grab the button, and I'll say let my button. Don't hear about this, as I said. We will learn what this let keyword means. Then let my button equal to document dot get element by ID. I want to grab the button now. The ID we give to the button is welcome button. Let's just make it button. All right. Then we want to say button. So with this, we've grabbed this button and then we've named it my button. Now going forward, when you want to call the button, we use the name my button. Okay, so I want to say my button dot add event listener. That means whenever something happens to my button, I want something to happen. Okay, and then the event listener I want to listen for is the click. So whenever someone clicks, once again, don't worry about this. We'll go into details of how all this works. So I want to run a function. All right, I want to see let's paragraph. I want to grab this paragraph. Let's go and see what name ID we gave it. We gave it the ID of more details. Let's paragraph 1 be equal to more details. Sorry, document dot get elements by ID, and the ID is more details, like this. Okay, so now we've grabbed our paragraph, and if you've noticed, whenever I finish a line, I put this semicolon over here. So the semicolon is very, very important. You can actually do without it and JavaScript will still work, but sometimes you may run into all sorts of errors. What this semicolon means is that I've entered the line. Okay, so once you've put the semicolon here, you can continue with the next line of code over here, and then when you finish, you put. So you can actually write all your code in one line just by using semicolons, and then you start the next line. But just to make it neat, remember, being neat and organized is very important. We do it this way. So once I've grabbed the paragraph and name it paragraph 1, I want to modify it, and then I want to say paragraph 1 dot style dot display. You remember display property? I want to set the display to none. What this simply means is that first grab my button, and whenever I click my button, I want you to grab the paragraph with the ID of more details, which is this paragraph, and I want you to set the style or the display of that paragraph to none. All right, hopefully we understand all that. Now let's click our button and see it in action. Click. So you see it's gone now. Let me refresh and show you. Click. So the paragraph is gone. So these are some of the things that you can do with JavaScript, and we'll be seeing a lot of these as we go along. In our next lesson, we are going to start looking at the universal programming concept, and later on we come and look at how to modify the HTML documents with JavaScript more properly. I will see you in the next lesson. Let's now look at JavaScript variables. Variables are like containers that are used to hold data or to store data. Remember, I told you that the concepts that you are going to learn in the next few lessons are universal, which means that they apply in whichever language that you go to. So the variable you learn here, when you go to another language, variable will still be variable, except there will be some difference in how the variable is declared. Right, so let's look at how we declare variables. Okay, so I want to first comment out this one. You remember the shortcut Control or Command plus /, and then it will comment out. This is how you declare a variable. You start with the keyword var. Okay, keywords are special reserved words. We will see some of them as we go along. Okay, so var, and then you want to add the name of the variable you are trying to use. Okay, so I want to say name, and you continue with your assignment operator, okay, which is the equal to sign, but we don't call it the equal to operator. You see why as you go along. So name equals to, and then do. This is a variable, which is the name, okay, and its value is do over here, right? So we just declared a variable. So you can declare another variable. Remember to always end your lines with semicolon. Okay, so as I said, you can continue the next one over here, and then you see email. Okay, and then you see do at gmail.com. But as I said, it's better to keep it clean. You can give as many white spaces as you want, so you can put the next one here or there, anywhere, but just make sure it looks clean. Okay, so I'll just put it on the next line. All right, so this is a variable. As I said, it will be wherever you go, it will be the same, except there may be a difference in how we declare the variable. So in Python, for example, which is another programming language, they declare, you don't need the var keyword. Declaring variables is very simple. You just write the name of the variable and then the value. But in JavaScript, you need to declare, you need to use the keyword var. Now, this is the traditional way of doing it. The new or the current version of JavaScript comes with a different way of declaring variables. Let me take this opportunity to explain to you the concept of versions. So programming language, just like apps, have versions. Every once in a while, those who manage it, okay, come up with a new version. The CSS we did, the current version of CSS is CSS3. The current version of HTML is HTML5. And all these, whenever they come with some new ways of doing things. They try to simplify things for developers. Now, the current version of JavaScript is ES6. ES stands for ECMAScript. ECMAScript is the organization that is in charge of deciding the rules of the web. Okay, they don't own the web or JavaScript per se, but they kind of like make the rules. But ES6 came not too long ago, and before ES6 we had ES5, and ES5 had this var way of declaring keyword. ES6 came with two different ways of declaring keywords. One is what we used before, the let. Okay, it's the same thing actually. So I could have said, instead of var name equals doodle, I could have said let name equals doodle, like that. Okay, which means that I want a variable and I want to name it doodle. All right, the other way of doing it is using the const keyword. Okay, there's a bit of difference between this one and that one. This one, when you use the keyword let, it means that you can change the value over here sometime, but you can't change the value of this one when you use the const keyword. Let me show you what I mean. If I try to reassign, let me comment out this. Now I'm going to try to reassign these variables, and you realize that this one over here will throw an error, and that's because we use the const keyword, which stands for constant, and so you cannot reassign it a new value. All right, but before I do that, let me introduce you to the console. This is a very useful tool for a developer, and when you are developing on the web, your console is located in the browser. All right, this is how you find the console. You can use how we found the Google Developer Tools by right-clicking and then going to inspect, or you can use the shortcut, hold down the function key and then press F12. So function key plus F12 will also take you here. And then I want you to go to the console tab, and this is where we have our console. This is very useful, and you see it uses as we go along. Whenever we have an error, the error will be thrown here, and then we will see what's going on. So now let's go ahead and reassign our variables. I'll reassign the name to, say, Kwame. And when you are reassigning, you don't need the let or the var or the const keyword. And then I'll reassign the email to, say, Kwame at gmail.com. All right, let me change this one to something that looks like an email. Okay, let's save. There you go. So there we have our error. You can tell this error is coming from the main.js file at line 24. So you come back to line 24, and then you realize that we are trying to reassign a value to a const keyword. And then, as they said over here, assignment to constant variable. You can't do that. All right. So we'll be using these as you go along, and you see how better to use, where to use the let keyword and where to use the const keyword. Alright, so I'll comment out this code and then we'll go ahead and look at a few other things. Using variables, you can do something like, let me just comment out only this one. You can do something like this. You can let cost1 be equal to maybe 5, and then let's cost2 equal to, let's say, 8 or 6. and then you see let's total equal to cost 1, okay, plus cost 2, like that. So what this essentially means is that I want you to add the value of cost 1 to the value of cost 2 and save it in the variable total. All right, so we can output the results, which is this total, onto the console, and then we'll see what we have. To output onto the console, this is how you do it. So you say console.log. All right, so you want to log onto the console, and in the brackets over here, you want to add the variable or the element or whatever you want to log. So you want to say total, and then we save. All right, so this is our result in the console. All right, so a few things to remember when you are dealing with variables. Remember that variables can contain letters as well as numbers and a lot of characters, but variables must begin with a letter. It cannot begin with a number. A variable name always begins with a letter or the dollar sign or the underscore sign. You can't use a number to begin a variable name. Always remember that. And they are case sensitive. What I mean by case sensitive is that if over here I named the variable name, okay, and I want to log out to the variable, and then instead of name with a small n, I say name with a capital N, you see that we have an error because name is not defined. It doesn't know name. Name has to be, as we saved it over here, it was a small letter, so it has to be. All right, so there you have it. Okay, always be mindful of that. And you can also use the reserved keywords as your variable name. And by this, I mean something like I say let's, and then you say const be equal to. You see that already you have an error here, which means you are trying to name a variable using a keyword. Never do that. It won't work. Alright, so that will be it for JavaScript variables, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Let's look at the various types of data in JavaScript. And when I talk about data types, we mentioned in our previous lesson that variables are used to hold data, and we've seen some of the types of data already. We've seen these ones which are always in quotes, right? It can be single quote or double quote, right? And we've seen these ones which are not in quotes, numbers, right? So these are some of the data types in JavaScript. There are 5 main ones. We have the string, the number, the boolean, the arrays, and the objects, right? And we are going to go through them one after the other. First, string. Anything in quotations is considered a string. So if I create a variable here, call it car name, okay, and I set it to Hyundai, this is a string. Anything in quotation marks is considered by the engine as a string. All right, and you can move strings around in various ways. There are some things you can do with strings, you can do with numbers. Some things you can do with numbers, you can do with strings. Let me quickly create another string, so I can say car model. Okay, I don't know much about cars, so I'm just going to type anything here. Okay, but I know there's Hyundai Elantra. This is also a string, and you can actually join strings together. You learn more about this. I can create another string, and I say car full name, like this, and I'll do car name plus car model. And what do you expect this to give me? All right, let's open up our console and find out. First, we have to log it to the console, of course. So we do console.log, and then we see car full name. All right. Now let's open up our console. Okay, we have some errors here. Oh, our live server cut, so we have to refresh it. Let me open the live server again. Okay, now I'll go ahead and open my live server. Let me zoom in a bit. All right, so this is the result we have. Here we are, line 40, okay? So Hyundai Elantra, that is when I added the car name and then the car model. We have Hyundai Elantra over here. So you can see that there's no space between them, which is ugly. So what we can do is that we can add a space between them. So you can see car name plus a space, okay? This string over here, just a space, and then plus car model. Then we save. Now we have a nice space between them. All right. So that is strings. Let's now look at numbers. If I create another variable and I say car cost like that, and I can set it to, let me put a comment over here. All right. So car cost equals, let's say 5,000. So this is a number. And remember, numbers are not put in quotation marks. Numbers are written raw like that. Now, if I put, let me create another variable actually and show you something. So if I say var car duties, okay, and the duties will cost, say, 2,000, right? Now I can do another, let's use let's. I just want you to see that we can use all of them. So let's total cost be equal to car cost plus car duties. Let's save it. Now let's log our total cost onto the console. So console.log total cost like that. There you go. So 7,000. Now if I put this in quotation marks, what do you think will happen? Let's see. You can make it single or double quotations, it doesn't matter. Okay. Now once I put this in quotation marks, they will be considered by the engine as strings and not numbers, even though they are numbers. Okay, once they are in quotation marks, they are considered as numbers. And now I do let total cost plus car cost plus car duties, and then I log it, see what happens. So you see, it joined them together like it joined the Hyundai Elantra together over here. Okay, so you want to be careful when you are dealing with these data types. All right, now it's considered as a number once again. Okay, so those are numbers and you can play around with them. The next one would be booleans. Okay, so before you go ahead and look at booleans, there's one thing that you have to beware of. So we said that strings are defined by these quotation marks, right? Whether double or single quotation marks. So let me use single ones here so that you know it still works. All right. Okay, so you see there wasn't any error. But what if in your line of code you want to put quotations? You want to write a sentence where there's a quotation mark. Let me show you an example. Let me console.log something. Console.log, and I want to log this is my friend's okay, friend's book. Okay, so you see there are no errors here, fine. But what if I had used single quotations instead? So I use single quotations and there's a single quotation mark over here for the friends. You see that there are errors over here. Now, this you can simply solve by using double quotation marks outside here. Okay. And then your problem is solved. What if in another case, let me show you another case. Console.log, and he said this is my book. When you look here, you realize that there's the double quotation mark here and there's this one here, and you want to put double quotation mark in your sentence. You realize that it throws this error because the engine gets confused which one is defining the string. To solve the problem, you use single quotation marks outside since you want to use double quotation marks in your so you can use single quotation marks over here, save it. Now your problem is solved. So let's now go ahead and look at booleans. Let me put in some comments here. All right. Now booleans have only two values, true or false. Okay. So let me show you how this works. So I can say car costs equals. Okay, this is how you use the equal to operator. So when you use this double equal to, it means I'm comparing them. It's the one on the right and the the value on the right, or the variable on the right and the left, are they equal? Okay, so I want to say car costs equals car duties. Now this will return false because car costs is not equal to car duties. So if I console.log it, let me save this in a variable. Actually, let me console.log it directly. If you console.log this, so you see that we get false. We can also do console.log. We can see okay, so what will you expect this to output? Car cost greater than car duties. It simply means is car cost greater than car duties. Obviously, this will return true because car cost is greater than car duties. You can go ahead and play around with this and see the possibilities there are. So now arrays. Once again, I'll define a variable and I'll say cars and I'll say equal to. This is how you define an array, by using this square brackets. Okay, so the content in these square brackets will be considered by the engine as an array, and an array simply means a list of items. We can put one here, so we can see Elantra, and we can see Sonata, and maybe Camry. All right, so this is an array, aka a list of items. All right, it's that simple, and we can console.log this as well if you want. Okay, so this is our array that has been logged for us over here. Now there are a whole number of things you can do with these data types that we are looking at. We go into details for each one of them as we go along in the subsequent lessons. Finally, let us look at the JavaScript objects. So if I see variable and I use car, okay, variable is defined by this curly braces or curly brackets. Okay, anything inside this curly bracket is considered an object, and an object has properties. This array, let me put, okay, arrays have values, the first value, the second value, and all that, but objects have properties before value. So I pressed enter here just to make it clean, look clean. Okay, so you have a property. In this case, we have a car object, and the car object will have properties. The first property I want to put here is the model or brand, and this is how you do it. And then you bring this colon, and the next thing that follows is the value. Okay, so you want to use a string and you want to see Hyundai. Right, then you continue the next one with a comma, you end this one with a comma, then you can press enter to go to the next one. You can link them up, sorry, you can line them up if you want, like this, comma, then the next one will come here, then comma, then the next one. But to make it look nicer, we press enter and go to the next line, and we can see model, car model, and then we can see Elantra, like that. And we can go ahead and add a lot of others. We can see car costs, and then we can see sorry, it's a number 5,000, comma, and then finally car duties, and then we can see 2,000. So this is a very simple object we have right here. The last thing I want us to look at is, if you are uncertain about the type of an object, how then do you tell the type? The type of a data. So this is how you tell the type of data. You use the type of method. So you see type of in brackets, sorry, brackets, and then you put the data that you want to put over here. So you type of this. Okay, so as you can see, this is a variable. Now if I console.log this type of, it should tell me that it's of the type variable. Okay, so let me console.log it. Sorry, I said type of variable, type of string instead. Okay, so as you can see over here, it tells me it's a string. Now if I copy this one down and then I change this to a number, so type of 5, okay, like that, and I save, so it will tell me it's a number. Okay, let me copy it down, type of true, it will tell me it's a boolean. You can do that for all the data types, right? And you can also use the variable name. So I can say type of, let me just copy this down and say type of, and use the variable name. So let's use the variable name car. Okay, and remember that we said car is an object because the content is in this curly braces. So if I say type of car, I should get objects, and that's what I have right here. So this will be it for JavaScript data types. We'll go into details for each of them in the subsequent lessons. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next lesson. All right, moving on, let's now look at JavaScript operators. Okay, so when I talk about operators, we have the addition operators, the arithmetic operators, which include addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and all those. We have the logical operators, which includes the and, or, and then the not. And we have logical operators, which are greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, and the likes. All right, so the first one we'll look at before you go to arithmetic operators will be the assignment operator. And we've already seen assignment operator. We've used this so many times, I don't actually have to mention it again. So this equal to over here is an assignment operator. We use it to assign a value to a variable. All right, so let's quickly look at the other operators. So I can have so let me create a variable. All right, let's now be using the new standard let and const. Okay, so if I use const x equal to 5, and in a real world project you don't want to be using just letters to name your variables. You want to name them just like we've been doing in the previous lessons. You want to name them with names that immediately someone knows, they know what they are doing. All right, so let me add a comment here that says JavaScript. Okay, so x equals 5, const y equal to, and you see whenever I type, I leave some space. You can actually do without leaving any spaces. So y equals 6, just like that, and it will work. But just do so that your work is neat, you want to leave spaces around the operators. Okay, like that. I can do all the basic operations that we do in basic mathematics. So I can console.log y plus 5. Okay, so this is the addition operator, and I'll save, and then the result is over here, 11. So let's go ahead and try a few of the other operators as well. You can actually type directly in the console. You can type your code directly in the console, but the thing is that you can't type multiple lines of code just like we do here. Okay, so I can declare, let my variables here x equals 5. Okay, x has already been declared because this code is the same thing that is running here. So if you are trying to declare x, it's like you are trying to declare it all over again. So that means we already have x. So if I press x and I press enter, you see that it gives me 5. And if I y and enter, it gives me 6. Let me clear the console so that we have some space. All right, let's try the other operators. I want to say y and then times x. Now we have our results, and as you can see, I didn't have to use the console.log because you are already in the console, right? And I can do y minus x, and that will also give me some results. And you can try that for all the other operators. Let me give you the list of the operators and the arithmetic operators, and then you can try them out on your own. All right, so these are the various arithmetic operators that we have. All right, so you can try all these out. The increment and the decrement operators, let me do that with you quickly. You may not be able to get it on your own. Okay, so this is how the decrement and the increment works. So I can say y plus plus, okay? Y is originally 6. So if I do y plus plus, it means increase y by 1. Okay, so let's see what we... Yes, this is a very good opportunity to teach you this. So you see they said assignment to constant variable because I was trying to increase y, which we made as a constant variable. So I have to make y a non-constant variable using the let keyword. So Control S. Okay, now if I say y plus plus. Okay, so you see that you don't have the error again. Okay, so I didn't assign, so I have to say y is now equal to y plus plus. Okay, so essentially what I've done here is that I want to increase y by 1. Okay, increment y by 1 and reassign the value you get to y. So if I press enter, you see that y is now 7. Okay, so that is y plus plus, and you can do the same thing with y minus minus. That's the decrement operator. And for the modulos, don't worry much about it for now. If we have to use it, we'll do more about it. And then the exponential. Okay, so raised to the power, raised to the power. So 5 raised to the power 2. Then you would say let's see, x raised to the power, like that's 2. That's how you do x raised to the power 2. Okay, so we've seen the first assignment operator, or the main assignment operator, the one that you'll be using most often, but there are a few other assignment operators, and let me show you those ones. Okay, so we have the assignment operators. Okay, so we have equal to, as you've already seen, we have equal to, we also have plus, equal to, like that. Sorry. And then we have minus, equal to. Of course, if you have plus, equal to, you can have minus, equal to, right? And then we are going to also have times, equal to. Okay, now this is how this works. If I say x plus equal to 5, essentially what I'm saying is that increase the original value of x by 5, okay, and reassign it to x. So x is originally 5, so here I'm increasing it by 5 and I'm reassigning it to x. So once again, x is constant, so let me change it to let. So now you can see x plus equal to 5. All right, press enter. Now x is 10. So if I check for x, realize that x is now 10. Okay, so that is plus, equal to. The same thing for minus, equal to. You can see y minus y minus equal to 1, and this will decrease the original value of y by 1. So y is now 5. All right, so you can do the same thing for times, equal to, or divided by, equal to as well. All right, so you can also have um, divided by, equal to. Okay, so this is the symbol for division. Okay, the same forward slash. Okay, let's try out division. We haven't tried division. So x divided by y, and let's see what we get. There you go. Okay, let us now look at the comparison operators. Okay, I won't spend too much time on this. It's very simple, so I'll just give you the operators over here. So comparison operators, there are a number of them. Here you go. I'll comment them out. So all these are comparison operators. The equal to we've already seen, and I said this means that if I see x equal to 5, essentially I'm asking that is x equal to 5. So since they are not equal, I get the results of false. Okay, now what if I say 5 equals to 5? Now you see that I'm getting true here, but it's actually not true, is it? Because this 5 is a number and this 5 is a string, so they shouldn't be equal to. But what is happening here is a concept called the type coercion. So when JavaScript sees that you are trying to compare a number and a variable, or even when you are trying to join them together, it will coerce the number into a string, okay, and then it will say they are equal. So if I try to do 5 plus 5, you see what I'm getting here, 55, but this is not actually the number 55. This is string 55. So it converted this 5 into a string and then joined them together. All right, so this is called type coercion, and it's because of JavaScript behavior, which JavaScript's dynamic typing behavior. Okay, so you don't tell JavaScript what the type of your variable is. In other language, for example, if you are going to create an integer, you might have to say int or integer 5. Then you are fixing the value that this is an integer, so it can't be anything else. But as you can see over here, when we were declaring our variables, we didn't specify whether it was an int or an integer or a number or a string or anything. JavaScript decide by looking at it. So when it sees double quotations, then it decides that oh, this is a variable. Okay, this is dynamic typing. So this can be problematic sometimes, and that is when we use this equal to equal to equal to. Take this from me. From now onwards, whenever you want to do comparison, use this equal to equal to equal to. Okay, unless you really know what you are doing. This equal to make sure that not only are they the same in value, but they are also the same in type. Okay, so 5 and 5, the value is the same, right? But 5 string and 5 number, the type is not the same. So if I use equal to equal to equal to for this same line, you realize that we will get false. Okay, so if I say 5 equal to equal to equal to like this, and I say 5, right? So now you see that we are getting false, even though it's the same thing over here. Okay, so this makes this one makes sure that the type is also the same. Okay, and this exclamation and then equal to sign means not equal to. So if I say x not equal to y, you see that I get true because x is actually not equal to y. And then you have all these ones, you can try them out. You have the greater than, you have the less than, you have greater than or equal to, and then you have the less than or equal to. And then you have this ternary operator too. It's very interesting actually. So you can see, actually we won't do it in this session. It's a bit, we have to do it into more detail. So we'll do it in the next lesson. Not in the next lesson, in one of our future lessons. Finally, we want to look at the logical operators. There are a number of them, but there are two of them that we would worry ourselves with. So logical operators. All right. So the two that we worry ourselves with is the AND operator. Okay, this is the same thing as AND. All right, and then the OR operator, which we write this way. Okay, we use this pipe symbol. All right, so let's try them out over here. Okay, so if I say x equal to 5, let me see what the value of x is. So x is equal to 5. So if I say x equals 5, is x actually equal to 5? Okay, x is now 10. Remember we changed it, and y is now 5. Okay, so if I say x equal to 10 and like that, y equal to 6, right? No, y is equal to 5. Okay, I get 1. Now 1 and 0 are just like true or false. So me getting 1 here means it is true that x equals 10 and y equals 5. Now if I do x equals say 6 and y equals 5, you see that I get 0, which means it is false. Okay, because x is not equal to 6. So when you use the AND operator, it means both sides have to be true. This must be true and this must be true before you get true. If one of them is false, then you get false. But when you use the OR operator, it means one of them has to be true. Okay, so if I say x equals 10, all right, and then I use the OR operator, and I say or y equals 6, which is wrong, right? Y is 5. Okay, you see that I'm still getting true because one of them is true, which is x equals 10. Right, so it's either one of them is true or both of them are true when you use the OR operator. But when you use the AND operator, both of them must be true, right? Okay, so I'm sure at this point, all the things that you've been learning seem abstract to you, and you're like, why are we doing all those things? Why are we learning all these things? As you go along, you'll get to know why, and you'll get to see their applications. Thank you, and I will see you in the next lesson. Now we are going to dive deeper into strings. Okay, we are going to look at the various methods of string, and when I say method, I mean actions that can be performed and on a particular type of data. So string has its own methods, and we'll be looking at them. And by looking at methods, I mean how we play around with strings and the kind of things that you can do with strings. All right, I've actually commented out everything in our code over here so that we have a clear console. Right. So now before we start, let's create a simple string that we will be using, will be changing around. So I want to name it my string. Okay, and I want to set it to hello. How are you doing? Like that. Okay. Now the first one we will look at is the length property. Okay. So this is a property and not a method. The difference is that when you write methods, you end with an open and closing bracket. But when you write methods, you end with an open and closing bracket. But when you write properties, you don't. And we will see what I mean soon. Okay, so I want to name it. I want to create a new variable. Name it string length. Okay, like that. And I want to my string dot length. All right, so let me quickly show you the structure. So first you have the data type that you want to change. So this is the data that I want to change, my string. Okay, and then you follow it with a period. And once you type the period, actually look at something. Once you type the period, okay, the code editor will suggest you all the possible methods and properties that you can change. So all these are methods of strings. All right, so the one we are looking for is the length. Okay, so length. All right, and then you end it with your semicolon. Okay, so now let's log out the string length and see what we have. And by length, this is what I mean the number of characters in the whole sentence over here, in the whole string. So H is the first character, E is another, L is another. So we have 1 2 3 4 5 6, even the space here. Okay, the space we've left here is another character, so it will be counted as well. So let's console.log our string length over here and see what we have. Okay, there you go. So there are 24 characters in our string. Okay, the next one we will look at is the index of. Okay, so we'll create a variable once again. I'll call it position, because my string dot index of. Okay, so as you can see, the tooltip over here tells you what it is. So it is a method. Okay, and it even gives you how you use the method. So string dot index of, and that is what we are doing. So in brackets. Now this is what this does. Okay, so you can actually use this tooltip a lot. It helps a lot. It tells you what it does. So it tells you here that returns the position of the first occurrence of a string. Okay, so in this sentence or in this string over here, if I want to find the position of how, okay, just the how in the whole string, I use the index of. So I say how. All right. Sorry, so I haven't explained what index of means. Index or indexing, it's very key. You have to understand indexing. So when I talk about indexing, it's a way of identifying or listing or numbering the content of any data at all. Okay, so when we have this data, when we are indexing the data here, this is the first index, second index, third index, but we start indexing with 0. Okay, that is called zero indexing. In the normal world, of course, when you are counting, you start with 1 2 3 4 5, right? But in programming and every other programming language you go to, you start with 0. Okay, so this is index 0, E is index 1, L is index 2, index 3. Don't forget this. So when I say the index 4, you are looking for 0 1 2 3 4, which is the fifth letter here. Okay, so don't forget that index always starts with 0. So when I say index of how, so it will count 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the space 6. Now, the first occurrence of how, which is this how over here, is at the 7th position. So the first letter of the how is at the 7th position. So let's console.log and see the results. So console.log our position. There you go. It's just as we mentioned that it will be. So that's the use of index of. Now, index of, as the tooltip mentioned, gives you the first occurrence of a string. But if you want, for example, the last occurrence of the string, then instead of index of, you can say, let's last position, like that, equals to my string dot last index of, like this. And then you can say u or whatever. Okay. And then it will give you the last occurrence of the word u in the statement. So if there was another u over here, okay, it will give us the position of this u and not that one. So if you console.log last position, okay, so it gives us 25, which is the position of this one over here. So the next one we'll be looking at will be the slice method. Okay, so let's my slice be equal to my string dot slice. Okay, and what this slice does is to cut a portion of the string for you. So if you give it the index that you want it to start cutting from. Okay, so in this example, I know this how here is at the index starts, this each here is at the index of 7. So I can say start from the index of 7 and cut the rest of the things or the string for me. So let me console.log it and let's see what's happening. My slice. Okay, so you see that it cuts from how are you doing. Okay, if you want to limit it at the where it ends to, so I want it to start from how, but I want it to end at how are you. Okay, so first I need to know the position of the u over here. So if this one is 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So I can say slice and then start from 7 and then end at 17. Okay, so it should be 18 rather. There you go. So now it cuts only that part for you. And there's another method that does virtually the same thing, which is my string dot substring, like this. Oh, sorry. So my sub, just name it my sub. Okay, and let's console.log my sub. So okay, I told you it's case sensitive, so if you make these mistakes, right, there we have it. So they do virtually the same thing. The next one that we'll look at is the split method. So my string, let's first put it in a variable. Let's my splits, okay, equals my string dot splits. All right, and what split does is that it turns your string into an array. Okay, hopefully we've mentioned array somewhere before, but if you haven't, we've mentioned array in the data types lessons. So array is just a list of items. So it will split the words or the content of your string into a list. So you decide how it should split it. So inside here, I want it to split it by using the white spaces, these empty spaces. So wherever it sees an empty space, it should cut. Wherever it sees an empty space, it will cut. So you do that by putting empty space over here, right? So let's console.log my splits. All right, so you see it has now turned our string into an array with all the words in our sentence or our string. Okay, so if they were separated, you could have also put commas here, commas. Okay, I want to show you a different way of splitting. So I can say it should split by the comments, okay, instead of the spaces. And let's see what happens. So you see it splits using the comments. So the spaces are actually there. This is the space here, this is the space here, but the comments are not there. So it split them by the comments. Let me take it back to the spaces. All right. So there are a lot of methods and properties that you can play around with. As I showed you, when you type my string, okay, and then you bring your period, they will give you all the possible methods that you, so you can play around with them. And then most of these ones you wouldn't actually use them. So the most common ones that you'll be using are the ones that we just mentioned. There are a few other common ones that you might use. Let me just put them here so that you can play around with them on your own. Okay, so these are some. So dot to lowercase converts whatever string, or okay, this string, everything to lowercase. Okay, dot to uppercase will convert everything to uppercase, and then dot trim will remove white spaces from the end. So if there was space here and there was space here and you want to remove it, you can use the dot trim. This has its uses when you are dealing with forms. Okay, so for example, if you ask the user to type their username and then they use the type username, after typing the username, then they press space bar. You don't want that space there, so you use the trim to remove it. And this dot starts with also checks whether the string starts with whatever you put here. So in this case, you are checking whether the string starts with A, and the result will be a boolean. It will be true or false. All right. So you can check these out and see what they do. Alright, so this will be it for JavaScript strings, and I will see you in the next lesson. Let us look at the properties or methods of numbers. Alright, so number is the other type of CSS data types, and we are going to look at its methods. Alright, so first I want to, of course, comment out these codes so that it doesn't interfere. Alright, now console should be cleared. Okay, so the first one, okay, of course, before we go ahead, let's create a few numbers over here that we'll play around with. So number 1 equals 5, number 2 equals, okay, and if I haven't mentioned this before, you can actually chain up declaration of variables, and this is how you do it. You declare the first one, comma, and then you don't need the keyword again. Then you can continue. Let number 2 be equal to, sorry, you don't need the declaration again, so you don't need the let again. Number 2 is equal to 10, and then finally number 3 is equal to, let's make this a decimal number, 2.234 or anything at all. All right, next let's look at the toString method. toString, now by the name itself tells you what it does. This is used to convert a number to a string. So let's create a variable, call it my number string, like this, and then we want to convert the number 1 to string. So we say num1.to string, like this, and then we open and close our brackets. Let's console.log our num string and see what we have. Okay, my num string, Control S, uncode type error, console is not a function. Sorry, it's supposed to be console.log, like that. Alright, so there you go. So what we've essentially done is that we've converted this number to a string. So this over here is a string. If you want proof, I can actually give you proof. Let's check the type of let's console.log log the type of my num string over here, and then you realize, oh, why do I keep making this mistake? Console. So you can see that my num string is actually a string. So this 5 over here is string. So that's how you convert a number to a string, using the toString using the toString method. Okay, the next one we look at is the number method. Okay, So let me show you what I mean. Let's my maybe number method equal to number. This is the number method, right? This is actually this is a bit different. It's unlike the other methods where you add dots before. This is declared this way, number, and then you open your brackets. Okay, so you want to check the number, or you want to convert whatever is in this brackets to a number. So you say number, and then in brackets, this is actually a function. We'll talk about those later. So for now, just know that it's one of the methods of number. All right. So inside here, we want to convert a string. So 34. I told you everything in these quotation marks is a string. So this is a string, and you want to force it into a number, and we use this line over here. So let's console.log our number method. My num that was not a good name. My num method. All right. Oh, why do I keep getting errors? Console.log. All right, so this over here is a string. Okay, once again, we can prove it by doing console.login the type. And okay, my num method, and you can tell it's a number. Sorry if I say string, it's a number. Okay. All right, so I want to use this opportunity to show you something. Okay, what do you think we will get when you convert let me write the code and ask you. Console.log and number of true. Okay, so what do you think we will get when we convert true to a number? Okay, and what do you think we will get when we convert false to a number? All right, so true converted to a number will give you 1. False converted to a number will give you 0. Okay, so in programming, in the concept of programming, true can be, equated to 1, and false can be equated to 0. All right, we will see the use as we go along. Sometime probably we will apply this. I also want to take this opportunity to show you something. Arguments. Okay, so this we said is a method. For example, this number here dot string is a method, and some methods have arguments. This console.log, this log actually is a method. Okay, that is applied on the console. Okay, so a method can have arguments. Okay, so this inside here is the argument of the method, and from the previous ones that we did to let me see. So this dot slice method, these two are arguments. This is the first argument. This another. The 18 is another argument. Okay, so this is one argument, and that's another argument. So those things that we put in the brackets are what we call the arguments. So the log method has 2 arguments. So far, we've been using only 1, but you can have 2. Okay, and the use of that is that instead of logging the stuff here without knowing what it does, we want to give it a label. So we can say we put comma between the arguments, like we did here. Or is it like we did here? We use comma to separate arguments. Okay, so let me give it a first argument, and this is a string. Okay, so I can say number value of true. Okay, and then I'll give this one to a label, and I'll say number value of false. All right, so let's see what we get when you console.log. Right, so you save it, and then let's look at our console. So as you can see over here, number value of true is 1. So this one, number value of true, that's what we have here. So you can use it to label your what you are logging to the console. And number value of false is 0. All right. Finally, what do you think we will get when we console.log this? Let me just copy and paste this line, and then change number value of empty string. Okay, What do you think you get when you convert an empty string to a number like this? Okay, empty is the same as false and is the same as 0. So to, when you convert it, you get 0. There you go. Number value of empty string is 0. All right. Let us now look at array methods. So as we said earlier, an array is simply a list of items. An array can contain strings, they can contain numbers, they can contain booleans, and they can contain a mixture of these as well. So let's first create a simple array over here. First, let us comment out this code so that they don't interfere. All right. I want to create an array and I want to name it my fruits, because you are going to create a list of fruits. All right, so I want to set it to a list of fruits over here, and remember, use the square brackets to create arrays. All right. All right, so the first method we are going to look at is the to.toString method, right? And as the name suggests, this simply converts the array into a string, and it basically does the same thing as the .join method, and we'll look at the difference very soon. All right, so first let's look at what the .toString looks like. So I want to console.log, right? So I want to label it string of an array, all right? And we want to say my fruits dot to string, like that. Okay, let's console.log and see what it looks like. All right, so this is a string over here. This is just the content of our array that has been converted into a string. Okay, that is what .toString does. Let's convert this in. Let's use the .join and see what we get. So console.log. All right, I want to say joined using spaces. All right, and want to see my fruits dot join. Okay, now the difference is that when you use the .join, you tell how they are joined together. So over here, when you use the .toString, you can see that they were joined together using these commas. Okay, and when you use .join, we decide what they are joined with. So I can use a space so that they look like a sentence. All right, so if I do it this way, let's save it. All right, so as you can see over here, mango, orange, mango, guava, and there are these spaces over here, which is what we put here. All right, so we can do the same thing, and we can join them with, say, dashes, like that. So instead of space over here, we can give space, dash, and space, so they will be separated by this whole part over here. So let's save them and see what we have. All right, so there you go. Okay, so this allows you to decide what separates them, and you decide how they should look. It looks a bit better this way. Let's now look at the .pop method. Right now, this .pop method is used to remove an item, right? And it removes the item from the end of the list. Okay, so if I do .pop on this my fruits, then it means I'm removing the orange, and it essentially creates a new variable which contains the new list of items. Okay, that does not include the one you popped. Right, so let's see it in action. So I'll say let's my pop equal to my fruits dot pop. All right, and this doesn't take any arguments. All right, and then we want to console.log our pop over here, and then see what we have. So sorry, I said it returns the new list of items. It returns the item that you popped instead. Okay, so if you have this list or this array over here, and then you do my array my fruits.pop, it will pop the last item, which is this orange, and then it will return it to you and save it in the variable that you named it with. Okay, so if I do this, let's label it, this is what was popped. All right, and then we see my pop. Okay, so as you can see over here, this is what was popped. So it was the orange that was popped. So essentially, once again, what I've done here is that I have popped one item from the my fruits array, okay, which is this orange, and then I named, or I assigned the array, the item that was popped, to my pop. So now my pop contains a value, which is the item that was popped. That's why when I console.log my pop over here, I had orange. Okay, so that's how to remove an item from the end. How then do you remove an item from the start over here? Okay, so you do that using the .shift method. Okay, and this is how that works. So once again, let's use const now my shift. Let's name it my shift. That's fine. Okay, okay, so this is what this part here, as we said earlier, is not necessary, but we use it just to label the content that we have here. All right, so this is what was shifted. Okay, and then we can see let me do it this way, it makes it a little more clearer. So you can see my array, sorry, my fruits dot shift, like that, and let's see what we have. Oh, sorry, we have to log into the console.log, right? Then we see all this is supposed to be in the console. Sorry. All right. Okay, so over here we want to console.log the my shifts. Okay, like that, and now this should work. So this is what was shifted. So mango was what was shifted. So meaning mango has been removed from the array over here. So now let us try to log my fruits and see what we have. Okay, so as you can see over here, we now have only two items in the my fruits array. So we have guava and banana, which are these two items, this one and that one, which means first we popped this one and then we shifted this one, and we said that both of those methods remove the item. Okay, that's why we are now left with guava and banana. All right, so the next one we'll look at is the dot push method. All right, like this. Okay, so the dot push method is simply used to add a new item. Okay, and it adds this new item to the end of the array. So since we have guava and banana over here, if we push say for example apple will be added at the end over here. So let's add a new fruit and see what we have. So we want to say so once again, let's use const, because we want to push. Okay, and in the bracket you enter what you want to push. So we want to push apple, like that. Okay, and then there's this thing too that I want you to be aware of, is this tooltip. Okay, this tooltip that they give you over here, it can be very, very helpful. All right, so it actually tells you what the method does. So if you look over here, it says appends new elements to an array and returns the new length of the array, which means that over here what we are doing is that we will add apple to the my fruits array. Okay, and after we've added it, we want to return the number of items we have in the list now and assign it to the my push. Okay, so the value of my push after we've done this will be the length or the number of items in the um, um, my array over here. Okay, so let's console.log my push and see what happens. So we expect my push to be a number. There you go. So they said 3, okay, which is the number of items that we have in the my fruits array now. All right. So the last array method we'll be looking at is the dot slice array method. Okay, and dot slice is used to create a new array by slicing or cutting out a piece of the old array. Okay, so let's see what it looks like. First, let us see what we have as our current array, because we've cut out some parts and added some. Okay, so we want to console.log my fruits. Okay, so we have guava, we have banana, and then we have apple. This our array currently. All right, let's now create a constant, name it my slice, and set it to my fruits dot slice. All right, and over here, as you can see from here, there are 2 arguments. Okay, the first argument is the start point, which is a number, and then the second argument is the end point, which is also a number. And if you decide to use only one argument, it means that becomes the start argument. Okay, so if I put 1 here, it means I want you to start from the index 1, okay, and slice everything from there to the end. Okay, remember how indexing is done. This index 0, index 1, index 2. Okay, so if I say start from index 1, it means I want you to slice from banana over here. And if I don't put an end index, it means slice all the way to the end. Okay, so let's console.log this and see what I slice. Sorry, like that. There you have it. So banana and then apple. Now if I add an end argument, for example, if I say slice from 1, okay, and end at 3. Now this number here, the end argument is exclusive. What I mean by exclusive is that start from 1 and slice all the way up to but not including 3, which means that you slice the index 1 and then the index 2 but not including 3. Right, so index 1 is banana, index 2 is apple, but not including 3. We don't even have index 3 here, so this will return banana and apple once again. Right, so it's still banana and apple. Now if I say start from 1 and slice all the way to but not including 2, that means slice from index 1 and end at index 1, so it will then only slice banana. So let's see. All right, so there we have it. Now the last thing we'll look at with regards to array is how to access the content of an array. Okay, so if you want to access the element as at maybe index 0, or the element at index 1, or the element at index 3, this is how you do it. So you say first my fruits, okay, and you say dot you say my fruits. Let's console.log it actually. Okay, so my fruits, and then you bring the square brackets over here. So what you put inside the square brackets is the index of the elements that you are trying to access. So if I put index 2, okay, so 0, 1, 2, it means I want the apple over here. Okay, all right, there you have it. So if I console.log index if I console.log index 1, I get banana, index 0, I'll get guava. Okay, that is starts the counting starts from this side, 0, 1, 2. All right, so that will be it for array methods. The next we'll be looking at is JavaScript functions. I'll see you in the next lesson. Functions are very important in programming. A function is just a block of code that is written to perform a particular function, and this block of code is also reusable. So whenever you need that function that it performs. You just call or invoke the function and then you have the results. Alright, so this is the structure of a function. So first you start with the keyword function like this. Let me comment out the old code. Alright, so you start with the keyword function and then you give the name of the function and then this open and close brackets, and inside there you want to put what we call parameters. We'll look at some of these very soon. So you want to put parameter, you also have, you can put as many parameters as you want. Okay, so I'm just putting 2 here, and you want to open this curly braces. Now mostly when you see curly braces, then you are looking at a block of code. Okay, so you have this curly braces, and inside here, this is over here you have the code to be run. Okay, so this is the structure of a function. So you have the keyword function, you have the name of the function, you have a number of parameters over here, you have the curly braces, and inside the curly braces you have the code that you want to run. Okay, so let's look at an example. Right, but before that, let me show you the difference between using a function and not using a function. So if I want to multiply two numbers, I can create those numbers this way: constant number 1, and then I can say equal to 5, and maybe const number 2, and I can equate it to say 3. Right, then I can say const multiplied value. Okay, multiplied value of the number, and I can say maybe number 1 times number 2. Okay, like this. Okay, and then I can console.log the multiplied value. All right. Okay, so then it multiplies number 1 and number 2 for me very beautifully. Now this way of doing it works all right, but if I'm coding and then I get to another part of my code where I need to multiply two numbers again, then I would have to write another code saying constant, and I can't even use the name number 1 number 2 again because I've already used it. So I have to say maybe constant number A, constant number B, and then that is not helpful. So you create a function that does multiplication for you. So whenever you need to multiply any two numbers, you just call the function and give it those two numbers. Okay, so let's see how we can do this. So simple, you want to create a function with the keyword function, then you give the function a name. So you give this the name number multiplier like this. Okay, and then our open and closing brackets, and inside there want to give it what we call the parameters, which is the variables or the contents that we want to use in the code. Okay, so we want to say number 1. Okay, in this case that will be the two numbers that will be multiplying. Okay, so number 1, number 2, and we want to open and close our curly braces, and inside here we want to do the multiplication. Okay, so inside here we can do the constant multiplied value like this, and then we can say equal to number 1 times number 2. Okay, and then we can say return. Now this return keyword is very important in a function. Okay, over here we've been using console.log to log out to the console, but when you use a function, essentially you want the function to return a result. That is what this return keyword does. So after multiplying the number 1 by number 2, you save it in a variable. Now you want to return whatever is stored in the variable here, and that's when you use the keyword return. Okay, so then you do this way, multiplied value. Okay, this is one way of doing it, but to make it even shorter, okay, we can do it this way. We can say return. Okay, we don't need to create a variable all over again. We just want to return the results of number 1 times number 2. So we can just say return number 1. Okay, number 1 times number 2, like that. So this okay, all this is what we've just simplified over here. All right, so now we can save it. Now whenever we need to multiply two numbers, we just call this function. Okay, so if I want to multiply 5 times 3, I just call the number multiplier. Okay, and this is how you call a function. First you mention its name, or you type its name, and then you open and close this brackets like this. So these brackets are what calls the function or invokes the function, and inside there you want to give what you call the arguments. Okay, so when you are creating the function, when you give it, what you give here is called parameters of the function. Okay, as you see from the tooltip, parameter 1, parameter num1, okay, as you see here, and parameter num2. Inside here you want to give what you call arguments. Okay, so you want to multiply 5, which is the number 1, times 3. You want to multiply 5 and 3. Okay, and you just save this. Okay, so we want to console.log the results here. So see console.log like this. Okay, there you go. So you see we get the same thing. So let's say at another point in your code you want to multiply two different numbers again. You don't need to go and do all this thing again. You just you want to multiply two different numbers, you just put those numbers here. So like this, maybe like that. Okay, and then those numbers are multiplied for you with ease. Okay, also I want to mention that you can save the result of a function in a variable. Okay, so instead of just console.login, if I want to save the result of multiplying 35 by 343 over here in a number, I can use a variable. So I can say const, okay, and I say something like results. Okay, nice. I can equate it to what we get when you use the multiplier. Okay, so let's use different numbers. So 52, 54, and then whatever. All right, so as simple as this, and then we can get, so essentially what we are doing here is that we are multiplying 54 by 545 using this the code that we wrote in this function, which is this line over here, and we are saving the results in the variable with we are calling results over here. So now we can console.log the results. Okay, and we get our results over here, as simple as that. I want to take this opportunity to show you something, the concept of local and global scoping. Okay, so if you have global and local variables. Okay, so we have something we call the global scope, and then we have the local scope. So when I talk about global scope, this variable is in the global scope. Global scope is simply any variable, or a global variable is simply any variable that lies at the top level of the program. Okay, so this variable, for example, and a local variable is a variable that lives inside the space of a function or a code block. Okay, so this let's create a simple variable over here. Let's say name. Okay, and then we create it to like this. So this variable over here, the variable name, okay, lives in the local space of this function, which is the number multiplier function. So we say that this variable over here is a local variable. Okay, it lives in the scope of the function. Okay, so whenever you have a block of code and this function, okay, the block here is an example of a block of code. We'll look at other blocks of code like the loops. Okay, we'll look at them later. So this function here, we say it is a local variable. And one thing you should notice that any variable that is created locally, that is inside a block of code, for example in a function over here, is not accessible in the global scope. Okay, so it's not accessible anywhere else in the function except in the function. Sorry, it's not accessible anywhere else in the code except in the function. Okay, so if you are inside the function, okay, we can console.log that variable. Okay, so if I console.log name, all right, so you see that whenever the function is called, the name will be console.logged. Okay, because we call the function here, we call the function there, so it's the name is logged, the name is logged. So you can see that we have access to the variable name. But when I come outside here, okay, anywhere outside the function, which is the global space, when I console.log, this same variable, which is the name, see what happens. Actually, using name was not a very good option to explain this to you because we've already created a variable called name up here, so it's kind of like stored in the memory of my code over here. So that's why we got the empty space. I tried another variable. Usually this is the error you expect to find, so I was expecting to see this error. So instead of name, let's use a different variable, something that we've not used before. So let's use let's say amount. Okay, and then we want to see maybe 5,000. Okay, all right. Now if you console.log in the function, once again you have access. So sorry, so amount. All right, so if you console.log in the function, you have access, so you see that the amount is printed over here. All right, but if you if you try to console.log the amount anywhere outside, you get this error. Amount is not defined at main whatever. And what this simply means is that you haven't defined amount yet. You haven't created the variable called amount, so you have no access to it. All right, that is what happens when you try to access a local variable in the global space. Finally, I want to mention that there are other ways of declaring functions or creating functions, such as the anonymous functions, the self-invoking functions, and the current way of doing it, that is what was introduced in the most current version of JavaScript. You will not find it in most programs because those programs were written before it came out, which is this is the arrow function. So we have anonymous function, anonymous function, self-invoking functions, and arrow functions, which is what I said is came with the most current version of JavaScript. Hopefully we'll look at them in our subsequent lessons. I'll see you in the next lesson. JavaScript objects are just like variables but can contain a lot of values. Okay, so JavaScript objects can be very useful. So in the real world, when you talk about objects, you are talking about something like a person is an object, house is an object, a car is an object, and you can do the same thing in JavaScript. You can create a person object and then we can play around with it in various ways. So let's see what an object looks like. All right. Okay, so to create an object, first we need, of course, the name, all right, which is just like variables, the way we name variables. Okay, but instead of using when you create variables, you use the keyword let's const or var, and we do the same thing over here, and then you add this curly braces, open and close curly braces. Okay, once you create a variable and you assign it to this curly braces, anything that you put in this curly braces or this variable is now an object. Once JavaScript sees this curly braces, it assumes that you are creating an object. Okay, using this method is called the object literal. There's another way of creating objects which is a bit old. I don't think nobody uses it these days. Okay, which is to use what you call the object constructor. So I would have said name equals new object like this. Okay, all right, so this is the object constructor. Now once you do this, it means name is now an object, but we prefer to use the object literal. Okay, which is this one, which is much nicer and cleaner. Okay, so let's create a simple object here. Okay, let's call it person. All right, and then of course a person will have first name. All right, so you have essentially when you create an object, you have a name. The value of objects are name value pairs. Okay, so you have first name, which is the property of the object or the name, and then you have the value, which is the person's name. Okay, and then you have comma, then you can continue with the next one. So you have for example, last name. Okay, and then you have all right, so let's look at the structure over here. So you have the name of the object, which is the same way we name variables, and then you have these curly braces, which tells the engine, JavaScript engine, that this is an object. And then you have these name value pairs. Okay, so we call this the property of the object. So the first name is a property of the object person. Okay, when you hover over it, the tooltip even tells you that this is a property. Okay, all right, so you can have as many name value pairs as you want, and these name value pairs can contain all sorts of data. So an object can contain strings, just as we have here. It can contain numbers, it can contain arrays, and all the other data types that you know. Okay, let's add another one. See height. Okay, and equate it to 6 feet, like that. So this is a very simple object. Let's see how we deal with the content of an object, or how we assess the content of an object. Okay, so if I want to access this person's first name, how do I do that? So simply let's console.log. All right, so if I want to access the name or the first name, okay, first I go through the name of the object, which in this case is person, and then I bring the dot. Okay, once I bring dot, you see that it gives me suggestions of all the possible properties of this object. So I want to see name dot person dot first name. Okay, and this will simply give me the first name of this person. So as you can see over here, first name Dudu. Let me put a semicolon here so that it looks a bit neater. All right, so if I want to access the last name, I just say, let me change this to last name. So I just say person dot last name, like this, and then I have the person's last name. Okay, finally let's add the height. Okay, so you can see height, and you can see person dot height, and then you get the height of the person as well. All right, so these are properties of objects. Objects have something else that we call methods. Okay, so essentially these are more like functions inside an object. Okay, so let me quickly show you an example. For example, once you have the first name and the last name of a person, then you don't actually need to ask them their full name, right? You can generate their full name by yourself, and you can do this using a method. Okay, so if I say function, okay, so as I said, they are just like functions inside an object, right? So a function that generates a particular type of result for you. All right, so I can say return, okay, and I'll say this, and this keyword, hopefully we'll look at it into details, but when I say this, I mean this person. Okay, so when I say this dot first name, I mean person dot first name. Okay, and I can say this dot first name plus an empty space. What I'm doing here is called string interpolation, where you are trying to join a number of strings together. So the person, this dot first name is a string. Okay, this do here, and then Okay, this dot first name is a string, and I'm joining it with an empty string or an empty space, and then I'm joining it with I'll also join it with this dot last name, like that. Okay, so I'm using a function to generate the full name of the person. Sorry, this should be a semicolon just like the others. All right, sorry, a colon. Okay, and notice that we have this colon after the name, and then the value comes, and then we have comma before the next name or the next property, and then the value comes. It's always like that. Even here we have the property, and then we have a semicolon. Then we have, if you want to continue with another one, you have to bring a comma here before you go ahead to the next one. So let's also try another method. So we can say method like generates, let's say generated email. Okay, so we want to use the person's name to generate their email. So um, what I did here, okay, the function that I wrote here, you notice that the function doesn't have a name. And in the previous lessons, in the previous lesson, I mentioned that there are other ways of declaring a function. One of them was anonymous function. This is an example of an anonymous function. It's simply a function that does not have a name. Okay, so if you don't need to call the function by its name, then you can simply use the anonymous name. So over here, we'll be calling the function using um, um, the property over here. Okay, we'll be calling it by through the full name. All right. Okay, so let me show you another example of how to declare a function, and this is the arrow function, which I said is the current way, or it came with the most recent update or version of JavaScript. Okay, it's called arrow function, and it makes the code a little simpler. All right, so using that one, you don't need the keyword function. You just open and close your curly braces. All right, and then you bring this fat arrow. That's what we call this symbol over here, a fat arrow, and then you can go ahead and do your string interpolation. Okay, so I want to say this dot first name. Okay, and I will join it with at gmail.com. Okay, so I want to use the first name to generate an email. So if the person's first name, in this case Dudu, I'll join it with at gmail.com to generate an email for the person. Okay, so let's save this. All right, let's try and access the full name and the generated email as well. It's a bit or slightly different from using the property name. Okay, let me show you. So console.log. Okay, so let's say full name. See person dot full name. Okay, and remember that we said this is a method. And if you remember, we said whenever you call a method, you open and close your brackets, or when you call a function, okay, you open and close your brackets like that. So that's how you use you call this method. Right, so let's console.log. So as you can see over here, you have the full name nicely presented here. Okay, and this space that we give here is the space over here. So if you join them without the space, then it will look quite ugly, and this is how it will look like. That's why I added this empty space over here. Now let's try and also access the generated email. It's basically the same way. Let me put a colon here. So person dot email or generated email, sorry, and then you want to open and close your brackets like that. Okay, okay, so it says undefined. Why is it undefined? Okay, so we got undefined here for a very good reason. All right, so when you use arrow functions, okay, so this might this is a little advanced, so don't worry yourself. I'll just correct it, but I will, of course I can't just correct it without telling you what I've done. So the reason is that when you use arrow functions, the this keyword behaves a little differently. The this keyword refers to the function in which it finds itself. Okay, normally the this keyword should refer to the person object here, but when you use it in an arrow function as we use here, then it refers to this over here. So when you say um, um, this dot first name, then it's saying generated email dot first name. Meanwhile, generated email doesn't have any first name. So instead of using generated email, this, let us use the name of the object directly. So instead we say person dot first name over here. So we save it. Oh, sorry, we removed something from here. Let's put back the closing bracket, and then we save it. Now our email is working nicely for us, but we have the first letter of the first name, which is capital, and in emails you don't have capital letters. So what you can simply do, well, you may have capital letters, but it's usually not the way. So you can actually convert this to lowercase using um, the method dot to lowercase, right? Just like this. Nice and beautiful. Our email has been converted to all lowercase. All right, so as I mentioned earlier, we can have all other types of data in an object. Okay, so you can have an array as well. Okay, so you can have something like likes, okay, which is also a property, likes of the person. Okay, and we want to set it to, remember we use the square brackets to identify arrays. Okay, so you can set it to reading and also coding, like that. Okay, and then we can bring a comma and then continue with another property. All right, but before we do that, let's log out the likes of the person and see console.log person. Let's label it likes. So then we see person dot likes. Okay, so these are the likes of the person that have been logged out for us. Finally, I want to show you that objects can actually contain objects. Okay, so you can have object inside an object inside an object, and then it goes on like that. So we have the object person, and you can have another object like the job of the person. Okay, we can make that an object as well, and then we set it to the value. The value is what makes it another object. So once we set it to these curly braces, then it's also an object. So it's an object inside an object. Okay, so we set it to the job could also have properties like title, okay, which we can set to maybe software developer, this, and then we can also have maybe the description of the job. We can set it to maybe develops or software, like that. Okay, let's see how we can go from person all the way to the job title. Okay, let's see how we log that. So we simply say console.log, like that. Now first we go through the person like this, then we say dot job, okay, which is a property of the person, okay, and it's itself an object too, so you can say dot to access its property, and then you can say title. All right, so let's label it. See job. All right, let's log it and see what we have. Okay, so there you go, job software developer, and then we can also log the description. No, this job title, and see job description. Oh sorry, person.job.description. All right, so this is it for JavaScript objects, and I will see you in the next lesson. Moving on, we are now going to look at conditions. Conditions are very, 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 very important in JavaScript. You'll be using them a lot. Okay, so when I talk about conditions, you want to run some particular code or perform some particular actions depending on different conditions. Okay, so if this happens, do this. If that happens, do that. Okay, it's used a lot in programming, and it's very important that you understand how to use them. All right, so let's look at the structure of a condition. First, let me comment out this code. So this is the structure. Let me add a comment here. All right. So first you have the if keyword. Okay. So we say we are writing an if statement. Okay. So if, and then in brackets, inside the brackets, this is where you write your condition. Okay. So the condition goes here. All right, and then you open and close your curly braces. And remember, I said when you see curly braces, then you are looking at a block of code. All right, so you want to run a particular block of code depending on a condition. All right, so over here, this is where you run the code. Okay, okay, so this is where you run the code if the condition passes. All right, now let's look at conditions in action. This red line over here, there must be an error somewhere. Let me. Oh, okay, so I have to comment out this part as well. All right. So let's look at conditions in action. First, let's create a variable. Let's call it house costs. And let's set it to 5,000, like that. Okay. So what we want to do here is that we want to check if the house cost, okay, is less than 2,000. All right. So that's the condition. This is our condition. Is the house cost less than 2,000? If the house cost is less than 2,000, or if the condition comes out as true, we want you to do this. That is what is in the curly braces. Okay, so we want you to console.log. All right, house is cheap, like this. Okay, so the error here is from this line over here, so it's not valid actually because we didn't complete it. Let's comment it out. All right, and then let's save it and see what we have. So if so we created a variable here, we named it house cost, and then we want to see if the house cost is less than 2,000. We want to console.log house is cheap. Okay, so the house cost was not less than 2,000. That's why you didn't see anything log here. All right, so if I change the house cost to say 1,000, see that house is cheap has been logged. Okay, let's change it back to 5,000. All right, so if it's not the only keyword we use in conditions, there's another keyword which is the else if. Okay, so essentially what I'm saying is that if house cost is less than 2,000, do this, which is what is in the do the first code block. Else if, then I bring another condition, house cost, okay, is less than, or sorry, is greater than 2,000, and house costs is less than 4,000. All right, and remember what we mentioned about the AND logical operator here. We said that when you use AND, it means this part and that part have to be true before the whole statement is true. So if the house cost is greater than 2,000 and less than 4,000, that is to say that if the house cost is greater than 2,000 but less than 4,000, so the house cost would be between 2,000 and 4,000. If that is the case, I want you to do something else. Okay, so what I want to do is to console.log house costs, house costs moderates, something like this. All right, and finally the last keyword you have to know for if conditions is the else condition. Now this the else keyword. Now this else block of code, okay, takes care of every other condition that hasn't been mentioned yet. Okay, so if house cost is less than 2,000, console.log house is cheap. Else if house cost is greater than 2,000 but less than 4,000, do this. Else meaning that for any other condition that is not covered by the first two, do the last one over here. And you can see that we've covered less than 2,000, we've covered between 2,000 to 4,000, but you've not covered greater than 5,000. Greater than 4,000. So this condition will take care of anything that is greater than 4,000. So we want to console.log. Okay, house is expensive, like this. Okay, so as you can see, because the house cost is currently greater than 4,000, which hasn't been covered by the if or the else if, we looked at this one over here. This one was run. All right, but if we change the house cost to say 3,000, what do you think will be logged? Okay, so if you guessed house cost moderate, then you are right. All right, so once again, let me go over it. This is how it works. If house cost, okay, so if once you've when you run if or else statements, first this will be run, okay, and if the condition here comes out as true, this block of code will be run, and then the running will be terminated. The rest of this will not be run. If this one comes out as true, only this one will be run. All right, but if this comes out as false, then it will proceed to the next condition, which is the else if house cost is greater than 2,000 and less than 4,000. All right, so if it proceeds to this one and this one comes out as true, then this one here will be logged. But if this one also comes out as false, then it will proceed to the next condition, which is the else, or that else meaning anything else that is not covered by the first two conditions. Okay, then this one will be run. So it goes in that order. Okay, right. So now that we have this, let's try and see if we can create a simple calculator kind of thing with this else if or else statements. So now let's work on our calculator. We are going to do this project just to practice our if or else statements, and this is a very good opportunity to use a function. All right, so we are going to create a function. We'll call it calc, and then we will pass the numbers that we are going to calculate, all right, as parameters to the function, and we will also add a third parameter, which will be the operation that we want to perform, whether it's add, subtract, or multiply, right, or divide. Okay, so let's create the function and call it calc. Inside the parentheses, we want to pass our parameters. So first we want num1, which is the first number, and then num2, which is the second number, and then over here we want to pass the operation that we want to perform as the third parameter. All right, so inside the function we want to write our if or else statement. Okay, so we want to say that if, all right, the operation that was passed. So remember that inside the parentheses of the if statement, that's where you put your condition, right? So we want to say if the operation equals add, right? So the operation that will be passed here, if it is equal to add, okay, then we want to add these two numbers, number 1 and then number 2, right? But before we can add them, we need to return the result, right? So let's actually create a variable over here. Okay, let's call it results. Okay, we'll declare the variable, but we will not set its value. So this is how you do that. All right, so inside here we want to say if the operation equals add, we want to set the result to num1 plus num2, like this. All right, so this is our first condition. All right, then we want to add the second condition using the else if, like this. Else if the operation is equal to subtract, and remember that we use the strict equality, this double 3 equals to sign. So if it's equal to subtract, we want to set the result to number 1 minus number 2. And once again another else if, and you can change the else if up as much as you want. So if you have a lot of conditions, first one will be the if statement, the next one will be else if, else if, else if, as many as you have, and then final the last statement would be the else, which will take care of any other condition that you couldn't cover in your if and else if statements. All right, so else if the operation is equal to multiply. All right, we want to set the result equal to number 1 times number 2. All right, like that. And then once again another else if the operation is equal to divide. All right, we want to set the result equal to num1 divided by num2. Okay, so these are the conditions that we need over here. We are going to do for just these for add, subtract, multiply, and divide. Okay, but as I said, the user could enter a wrong operation. So the user could enter, instead of subtract, then they maybe forget to add the a. Okay, and then in that condition, in that state, or in that situation, it will not be covered by any of these conditions, because the condition we put here is subtract and not the one that they inputted. So we have to add the else statement to cover anything else apart from these ones. So the else statement doesn't have the condition because it's covering everything else that is left. Okay, so it only has the curly braces for the code block. So else, we want to set the result to an error message. Okay, so we want to see maybe something like sorry, an error occurred. All right, then you can see something like check the spelling. Am I making so many mistakes? All right, check the spelling of your operator. Okay, so something like this. Now this is all we need for our function, right? Finally, remember the return statement for the function. Unless you return the result, then the function is not returning anything. So we have to return the result. Okay, so when we call the function, it will return the value of the result for us. Okay, and remember that when you are writing a function, once you bring your return statement, anything you put down here will not be run. Okay, the return statement is always the end of your function. All right, now let's try out our function. Okay, so let's call the function. All right, and pass, let's say 4, and second number, let's pass 7 or 5, any number at all, and then operation you want to pass add. Okay, let's console.log the results like that. There you go. All right, so we added 4 and 5, and then we had 9 over here in our console. Okay, so let's change it to subtract and see what happens. So there you have it. So you can use multiply as well. And then finally divide, just to make sure they are all working. 0.8. All right, so let's try something that we didn't cover in these conditions and see. Let's misspell the divide like this and then save. You see that we have the error message that was covered by the else statement. Sorry, an error occurred, check the spelling of your operator. All right, so I want to show you something else. There's something we call a default parameter. Okay, so for these parameters you can set a default value. Example, the operation. Okay, you can set a default value like add, and what this means is that if the user does not include, or if the function is called without this parameter at all, you should assume that the value of the parameter is add. So in this case, if I decide to ignore the divide over here, okay, it will automatically assume that I'm trying to add. So if I save and run, now we have 9. Okay, that is, which is the divide. So if I set it to say multiply, then it should multiply it for me. So it will assume that the default value of um, the parameter over here, which is the operation, is multiply. Okay, so even though I've set the default to multiply, if I specify over here that the parameter is add, it will add rather than multiply. Okay, so the default is just in case that that parameter is not provided. There you go. Okay, so there's a simpler, more cleaner way of writing conditions, and let me show you how it works. It's called the switch statement. Okay, all right, so this is how it looks like. So you have the keyword switch, all right, and inside the parentheses, this is where you put the variable that will be changing. Okay, this time not the condition but the variable that will be changing, like this. Okay, so in this case is the operation that will be changing. Okay, so we want to write some condition depending on which operation is given by the user. Okay, all right, then you want to open a curly braces, and then you say case. All right, so if the operation is add, then colon, not semicolon over here, then you press enter. Right, if the case is add, or in other words, if the operation here is add, all right, what do we want to do? We want to set the results to number 1 times number 2, right? Sorry, number 1 plus number 2, like that. Okay, then you end it with a semicolon, and you add a break here. Now, what this break statement or break keyword does is that if this condition passes, I want to break out of this condition. I want you to stop running the code, okay, because this will be run. All right, so that's what this break does. And then you continue with the next case, right? So you have case subtract. That is to say that if the operation that's provided is subtract, you want to set the results to number 1 minus number 2. Okay, and then once again you want to add the break statement. Okay, don't forget the semicolons over here. After the case it is colon, but after there is this line and then the break line, it is a semicolon. All right, and then you continue with the other conditions as we have over here. Now for the break statement, we have something that works just like the else statement, and this is the default um, keyword, all right, or the default statement. So you end it with default after you've entered all your possible conditions. So you have the default that is the same as the else over here. So inside the default, you want to add what we added right here. So let me just copy and paste. All right, now let's comment out this one and see if we have the same thing happening. All right, so we call, and then let's pass multiply. All right, so our code is still working. So that is the switch statement. Now the disadvantage with using switch statement is that when you are using a case where you have comparison operators, you using the switch operator becomes very, very complex because it was not meant for that. All right, what I mean is an example what we did over here. Okay, what we did over here. So if you want to use comparison operators like greater than, less than, and all that, okay, because over here we don't put a condition, so that you say switch operation less than or case operation greater than, you can't, it becomes very complex. So if you have comparison operators, just use the if or else statements. All right, so this is it for our simple calculator project. We will be creating a more interesting, a more nice calculator with beautiful user interface and all that. And we'll be doing that after we've looked at the ways JavaScript is used to change the content of HTML. Okay, so how we use JavaScript to modify HTML content, and then we'll do a nice calculator project as well. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next lesson. So this is going to be the last lesson with regards to the universal concepts of programming. In the next lesson, we'll be looking at how to change the behavior of a website using JavaScript. Right. In this lesson, we are going to be looking at JavaScript loops. Right. Loops are used to run a certain code block over and over again. Right. So essentially, you are doing the same thing over and over again. Let's look at this piece of code over here. First, I want to comment out this part, and I'm going to save it, and then let's see what is logged to the console. All right. So as you can see, there's some kind of repetition over here. Car number 1, Elantra, car number. So we have a cars array. Okay, we have an array here which we are calling cars, and we are console.logging each of the values of the array, right, which are strings. Okay, so we have Elantra, Sonata, and so in this line we say car number 1 plus cars of the index 0. So remember indexing 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so the index 0 is Elantra. That's why you have car number 1 Elantra, and then over here we have index 1, which is Sonata, and then it repeats. So you can see there's a pattern, there's a repetition, and that is a good opportunity to use loops. Right. So we have just 4 cars over here, so we can do console.log one after the other for all of them, and it's no big deal, right? But what if we had 1,000 cars? Can we console.log each one of them individually like we've done here? It's actually very impractical, right? So let's see how loops work. Let me console.log comment out this part, right? Then I'll uncomment this part. Okay, now let's look at the structure. So this for loop essentially does the same thing as this, but as you can see, it is much simpler, right? So if you had 1,000 cars, this would have 1,000 lines of code, but this would still be just about 3 lines of code. Right, so we start with the for keyword, and inside the parentheses we have 3 different statements. Remember, when you see a semicolon, it means a statement has ended, right? So we have this first statement, and then we have this second statement, and then finally we have this third statement. Let's see what each statement means. So the first statement is what specify the start condition or the starting point of the loop. Okay, so we set a variable, or we create a variable, and then we call it I. All right, and then we set it equal to 0, which means we want to start from 0. And then the second condition over here specifies the condition for the loop to keep running. Okay, so we want to run the loop until we have a number that is just less than cars.length. And what is the length of the cars array? It is 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 3 elements in the cars array. So essentially what we are saying here is that we want to run the loop 4 times. All right. And finally, the last statement we have here is this statement runs whenever the loop runs. Okay, so we start from 0 as we specified here, and we want to run till 4. So after each run, we change the variable here, which is I, by 1. We increment it by 1. Remember the increment operator I plus plus. Okay, so after each run, whenever you run it, so you start from 0, you run it once, then we increment it by 1. So it's now 1. Okay, then we run it again, we increment it by 1, it's now 2, we run it again till we get to something that is less than cars.length. And what is the first number that is less than cars.length? Cars.length is 4. The length of the cars array is 4. And what is the first number that is less than cars.length? That is 3. Okay, so we want to start from 0, then we go to 1, then we go to 2, then we go to 3. And that is exactly 4 times. Okay, and inside here, inside the code block is where we specify what we want to happen whenever the loop runs. Okay, so whenever the loop runs, we want to console.log, right? And what are we logging? We are logging first this string car number. Okay, remember string concatenation. Okay, that's what we are doing here. We are joining strings together. So car number plus, over here what we've done is I plus 1, which is this I. So if we take the first instance, this loop of code runs where I is equal to 0, what will I plus 1 be? It will be 0 plus 1. So we have 1 over here. So it will be car number 1. Okay, and then plus, we are trying to reproduce this, right? so plus this semicolon. Okay, so we are joining them together. We join car number, and then we join 1 to 8, and then we join a semicolon, plus finally cars of I. So we are still on the first instance where I is 0. So if you say cars of I, right, or the cars the index of I, so which is cars the index of 0, which is this elantra. So that is what happens the first time this code block runs. Okay, now the second time it runs, I will be incremented by 1 as we specified over here. So I will now be 1. Okay, so if we run the statement, if you run the code block over here, you have car number I is now 1, so 1 plus 1 will be what? 2. So that would be car number 2, and then we add our colon and plus cars of the index I, which is now 1. So index 1 is what? Sonata. So it will run again. Now I will be 2, and then it will print out Camry, and the last time it will print out Corolla. So let's save it and see if we get the same thing as what we got. Sorry. Alright, so I saved it, and then as you can see, we still have the same thing as what we did over here. So if the cars array was even 1,000, okay, the length of the cars array is even 1,000, you still need just this line of code, and then everything over here, everything will be worked out for you by the loop. Alright, so let's look at another example, but before that, I want to let you know that the for loop is not the only loop that we have. Across the major programming languages, the main loops that we have is the for loop and then the while loop. Okay, the most common one, or the one that you use mostly, is the for loop. I don't remember how many times I've actually used the while loop. Alright, so the for loop is what you'll be using most of the time. Okay, and there are a few other types of the for loop as well. There's the for in and all those. We will look at some of them. All right, so let's look at the example. Okay, let's create an array of people. Let's set it to an array, of course, and so we are creating an array that contains objects. Okay, so the first object, right, is and notice how I'm arranging things. Okay, so I didn't just do it this way and then comma, do it that way. Sorry, I mean this would also work, but it wouldn't look nice. All right, so that's why when I type my square bracket, I press enter to get it to look this way, and then I can start with my first object, and because the object is going to have multiple lines of code, I press enter again for it to look nice like this for me. So for our first object, we want to say the first name, and we want to set it to Dudu. All right, then we want to say last name, and then we want to set it to say CC, like that. Sorry, it's an object. Remember the structure of an object. You don't end, you end with a comma like this. All right, then we bring our comma, we bring the next object in our array, and want to set the first name, want to set it to, let's say, Kwame, comma, and then the last name, want to set it to Sifa, and then let's add one more object over here. Want to set the first name to say Seidu, and the last name to say Isa, like that. All right, let me save it. Okay, so you may have noticed that our object here doesn't have a name, right? So when we looked at the objects, okay, the section where we looked at objects, we said you create an object using a variable. So you create a variable, then you assign it to an object. But you can also create an object without a name, like in this case. Okay, for example, also when we created an array, we gave it a name. Okay, like we did here, we gave the array a name. But you are going to, if you are going to put this array in another array, for example, then you don't need to give it a name over here, and that is what we have here. So we have an array of people, and inside the array we have person objects. So this is one person object. So if you were going to name it, for example, maybe you'd have named it person. So this is one person object, and then we have another person object, then another person object. All right. So let's create a loop to loop through these person objects and then return as their full name. Okay. So we want to say for, and then want to say I. Remember the start condition. So I is equal to 0. And this is how it always looks like. All right. So I is less than people dot length. All right. And then finally the last condition, I plus plus. Open and close our curly braces. And inside there, we want to create a variable called full name. Right. And then we want to set it to people. Right. Pay attention. So people, which is this people array over here. And the person, we want the person at the index of I. Okay, so in the first instance where I is equal to 0, the index of I will be what? This person object. Right? The second time it will be this person object. The third time this person object. So we want the person or the people index of I and dot. Remember that at the index of I, what is there is an object. And remember how we assess the properties of an object. We do that using the dot operator like this. So we say dot. Once I did that, you see I'm getting suggestions over here. So I can say dot first name, okay, and then I can do plus string concatenation plus an empty space because we don't want the names to be joined together, and then we have another plus. Want the same people of the I index dot last name. Okay, so essentially in this line we are creating the full name by joining the first name and then the last name. There's a very actually a much simpler way of doing string concatenation, and it's called the template literal. I'm not going to mention it here. You can search it on your own and then you find it. You find it online. Right now, let's console.log this. Let's console.log the full name. All right, and then see what we have. Okay, so as you can see over here, so we have everything nicely logged for us. We have the first person object, do the CC, and then we have the second person object, and we have the last person object as well. Now just to show you the other way of writing a for loop. Okay, so that is the for in way of doing it. All right, so you can say for, and then inside the bracket you say x in people. That is to say that for any item in people, right? So in this case we are going to run all the items, unlike in this case where we have a particular stopping point. So we can say in this stopping point you could have said people.length minus 1, which means that it will be run 2 times and not the whole length of the thing. So it would have run the first one and then the second one, but will not run the last one, right? But when you use for x in people, it means that you want to run for all of them directly. All right, and then we can say that let's do something different. Let's console.log people at x, right? At the x, and then we want to say dot first name, just the first name. All right, so there we have it. Okay, so let's look at the other type of loops, okay, which is the while loop. All right, now before we mention the while loop, there's something you need to look out for when you are working with loops, okay, and it's called the infinite loop. Infinite loops can be very worrying. When you run into an infinite loop, your machine will freeze. All right, especially if it's not a very powerful machine, it will just become useless. You'd have to restart the machine or maybe switch it off and switch it back on, and then it will clear off. All right, So be careful with infinite loops. How you get infinite loops is if you don't specify the end point. Okay, so for example, if our endpoint over here, we neglect the endpoint over here, or we specify an endpoint which doesn't exist. Okay, for example, if we say that if you want to stop at I greater than people dot length, okay, every number greater than 4 is greater than people dot length. So even a billion is greater than people dot length. So it will keep running till infinity, okay, which would freeze your machine just like that. And sometimes there are mechanisms in the machines that will, or the browser that will just stop it on its own, right? But if you don't have that kind of mechanism, it will just keep running on. You would have to restart the machine. I will show you an example of an infinite loop. And this is very popular with while loops, okay? So you have to look out for it. Okay, so a very good quick example of while loop will be, we start with the while keyword, and then you see I once again. And if I didn't mention before, this I, you can actually change the I. Okay, you can use any variable. You can say X. You can. That's why I use the X here so that you know we can use something. You can name it whatever you want. But this is conventional. Okay, everywhere you go, you see the I. So it's good to also do it that way so that whenever immediately someone takes your code, they can easily tell what's happening. And you realize that I've been mentioning this a lot. Immediately someone takes your code, or if someone sees your code. Now, when you are developing, keep in mind that you are writing the code for someone to read. Okay, it's good to keep that in mind. When you keep that in mind, you tend to apply all the best coding practices, right? So you have to keep your code as clean and as neat and as readable as possible. Never forget this. All right. So you start with while I is less than, for example, 10. Okay. And then want to say console.log I. Okay. And you have to specify your end or your stopping condition in the code block. Okay, unlike here where you specified it in the parentheses, here you have to specify it in the code block. So you won't say sorry, I mean your this is your stop condition, I is less than 10. Okay, but you have to specify your increments over here. So I plus plus. So you do it the first time where I is less than 10. So you start from 0 automatically, and you increase it by 1 after running for the first time, the second time by 1 again. So it goes from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way till it gets to just less than 10, which is 9, right? If you fail to put this one over here, the I plus plus, I actually want you to try it, okay? So when you finish this lesson, try and remove this I plus plus over here, and then save. You see what will happen. So you can just correct it by, just restarting your machine, and everything will go back to normal. All right, it's good to try just to see how it looks like, and then in the future you make sure you don't make that mistake again. Right, so let's save it. Okay, so there we have our response, our result. And now you see that this one started from 3 instead of 4 because we've already created I here when we run this loop, and then it's stopped at 3, right? So it's over here, it started from the 3 and then 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, in normally if this was the only thing that we did, it would start from 0, 1 to all the way to 9. Okay, so in the next lesson, we'll start looking at how we manipulate the behavior of our website using JavaScript. I will see you there.